What's up, folks? Guerrilla Radio episode 8. Here with Susie again. We didn't coordinate the shirts, it just kind of worked out that way. But we're going to jump into what we talked about last time. So we've been getting into, last episode was about debunking food myths, and we left off with, we're going to jump into this whole idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So I'm going to talk a little about the history of why we think that, and then Susie's going to jump into hormonal control and intermittent fasting stuff, and some of the benefits of skipping breakfast. Okay, so it's one of those things, like one of those axioms that you hear that you don't dispute because you just heard it your whole life, right? Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Well, if you look at the history of breakfast, it really wasn't a thing until around the 18th century, where people would start to, once we got more scheduled and living in more confined societies with schedules and routines and factory style work or set jobs, people would start integrating breakfast or eating beforehand. But up until then, it was really considered like a gluttonous thing, right? Only the rich people had access to eating breakfast, had enough food. And what they would have is usually just leftovers from the night before. So it really wasn't much of a thing until the early 20th century. So it started out, the first time this was ever noticed was in 1917. I believe the magazine was like the Healthy Magazine or something very generalized, the name of it, but it was the oldest health magazine at the time, and this physician came out and said that she first coined breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And then what happened between that time frame and around 1944 was John Kellogg and his partner Post, cereals and Kellogg cereals, they were working together, they were running sanitariums, right? They were, at least Kellogg was super religious, and he ran sanitariums and believed that he created the first granular cereal. It's basically like hard wheat. You had to actually almost cook it and soak it in water before you could eat it. And he believed that it was healthy to have that bland whole grain cereal every morning. So he was, around that same time, he was creating that, and then Post cereals, he was creating something very similar, and culminate all the way fast forward to 1944, and that was the first targeted ad campaign to capitalize on breakfast as the most important meal of the day, and start really pushing this advertisement for cereal. And then, of course, since then, it's just gone diabolical, really. And in the late 1940s, Post started coating the cereal with sugar. They started with cornflakes. I think it was cornflakes and the whole grain cereal were the first, like granola basically, were the first cereals. And then they started coating them in sugar, and you had Frosted Flakes. And then, of course, the more sugar you put in stuff, the more people are going to buy.
Right.
So then it just became a race for advertising. And I think it was 2013, they said cereal sales were in the $10 billion range. And then the most diabolical thing that I think, I have a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they watch cartoons or whatever. You will see Trix and Lucky Charms and all this stuff put right into their advertising. Mm-hmm. And they intentionally create cartoon characters and Snap, Crackle, Pop and all these things that kids would appeal to. Mm-hmm. So they ask the kids for sugar, which is all cereal anymore is. It's just complete sugar. So that's how it got to be. There's even some play with some people in the bacon industry pushing it as well to hopefully sell more products. So I just lay that out because sometimes we hold these axioms and these ideas that we hear to be true, but we don't really understand that they were put into our minds by really smart advertisers as opposed to really good research. So it's really important to recognize that stuff and to kind of step back on getting yourselves too bogged into I have to eat breakfast, I've removed breakfast for almost a year and a half now, and I've loved it ever since, and I have no plans on going back. So keep that in mind. That's kind of how we got there. And so then let's as we step into kind of the health benefits of it, I've never seen, the most recent research I saw was a survey, it was a study in 2013 done by Harvard, and they basically took everything they could find on breakfast, effectively, being of its importance, and there was really no correlation to weight loss, type 2 diabetes, anything like that. There has been some research that suggests that, but it's usually just, we go with correlation versus causation. Just because they didn't have breakfast doesn't mean they're more likely to be type 2 diabetic. We don't know what they're eating lunch and dinner.
Yeah,
right?
The
so
types
really
of foods
evidence.
as well as what they already have going on within their physiology. I mean,
totally.
You could totally get away with having breakfast for however many years and maybe not see issues until way later. So, yeah.
So talk to me about, I know when you coach your clients, you guys stick to an intermittent fasting model, right? So that's some with us. So talk to me about some of the benefits of that.
So I guess one of the main things is I'll have a lot of people come in that are diabetic, and when I say no breakfast, that's one of the biggest things is they look at me like,
right. Are you crazy?
My blood sugar is going to just completely drop. And but it actually helps to stabilize blood sugar levels. So in the morning is usually your highest cortisol release. So you usually have spikes in cortisol in the morning, which increases insulin secretion. Mm-hmm. So eating only like fuels that, if you think of it that way. So it's actually beneficial if you fast, because you're helping to create more leptin, and which leptin helps to tell your body that it's full. Mm-hmm. So you're creating some more sensitivity to leptin and insulin, or resistance, sorry. And so when you do that, that's going to help actually stabilize long term your blood sugar levels. So we actually see some amazing changes in blood sugar levels just by fasting alone. Even like if you don't touch what they're consuming during during lunch and dinner, you're still seeing amazing changes. So on top of that, if they also are decreasing their overall glucose intake during the day as well, they're seeing even more dramatic changes in their blood sugar levels and more stabilization too. And their fasting blood sugar levels are decreasing. That's one thing when you do a blood sugar, an A1C test, you usually do it fasting to see how high your sugar levels are after fasting. And when it's really high after fasting, that's when it's not a good thing. It should be lower. But so when you're fasting, that does help to decrease that. But also on top of that, it helps to reduce hunger. You end up using fat as your main fuel source instead of sugar. So you have less crashes throughout the day, and you have less hunger throughout the day. So, I mean, it kind of feeds into advertising as well, because when you think about it, most breakfast foods are super sugary or bread-based or some type of glucose. Yep. And so you look at that, and then it just feeds into the rest of the day, so you're more likely to eat more throughout the day and always be craving something, and usually craving sugar. So then your meals end up not being good. If you have a bad breakfast, you're more likely to not eat on plan for lunch or dinner. Yeah. I mean, it's just that's kind of how our body works. But the other thing too is that if you do want, I mean, it doesn't mean that breakfast is the worst thing in the world, right, but you want to make sure that you have a good breakfast. So what you eat in the morning is going to fuel the rest of your day. So doing high, good, healthy fats and oils, as well as proteins, can be a much better option than doing sugar or bagels or cereal or anything along those lines. So always making sure to have those good fats can definitely help set the pace for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep an eye on things that we always deem to be healthy anyway. It's like, a big glass of orange juice, which is always like the morning breakfast, right? Yes. Even if it's pure orange juice, and that's, I'm not saying,
still higher
obviously
sugar
good
content.
vitamins and minerals, but loads of sugar.
Right.
Loads of sugar. It's not that different from drinking a soda sometimes, depending on the brand.
Yeah.
So keep being vigilant about that too. It's funny too, because advertisers, going back just a step, but advertisers realize that breakfast is the most manipulatable advertising source for them. They say American lunches and dinners are pretty well set, but they can always make more money by focusing on more breakfast advertising.
Well, look at how many fast food restaurants have added breakfast over the last however many years. Yep. I mean, more and more as time goes on.
It is, yeah. So, good point. I'm a big fan of the intermittent fasting model and skipping it all together. Some people say I'm not going to do that. There's no way. So then, like Sue's pointed out, keep it fat and protein based, minimize that sugar intake. And even if you try it early on, I'm not saying your first month is easy, because you're hardwired. You've been doing it for years, so your body's like, where's that fuel I'm used to? But I would tell you, after extended periods of time, for me it was about 6 weeks, and it just, you lose that craving in the morning. I'm at the point where 1 and 2 p.m. I'm eating at 1 and 2 p.m. without having any issues of hunger anymore. Yeah. It's just training your body to think between, we talked about it last time, appetite versus hunger. I mean, that just keeps coming up all the time. So know when your appetite is, I want to eat, but you don't need to. Hunger is your physiological drive to eat. And the more you fast, the more you tap into your hunger and get rid of your appetite.
Yes, definitely.
So breakfast is not the most important meal of the day, but it is the most advertised meal of the day.
Yes.
Cool?
Yep.
All right, thanks. See you next time.